Thank you. Over to you, Andrew Thompson from Legal.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's IJB Audit Committee. Moving swiftly to agenda item 1, I can ask for nominations for the appointment of chair.
I'm happy to nominate Jack. Sorry, Andrew Jack. My brain's not working.
Yeah, I would nominate. I would, if that's a nomination, I would second it.
Thanks, Peter. Any other nominations for the chair? There have been no other nominations. Andrew, can you take Andrew Jack, can you take the chair, please?
Yes, thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a bit exciting, isn't it? First thing. Anyway, thanks. Welcome everybody to the last meeting of the Audit Committee in 2022. It's quite a full agenda today, and there's a couple of new things, but a lot of it's familiar territory, so hopefully we'll get through everything in the allotted time. I've been asked to bring forward agenda item 10 to the front of
Andrew, sorry, it's Karen. Sorry to interrupt here. Can we go to the appointment of the vice chair, please?
Oh, sorry. Right.
Sorry,
okay,
that's it. Item 1. It's once you've taken the chair.
Right. Okay. Like ask for vice chair, please.
I would nominate Catherine.
Okay, have we got a seconder?
Seconded.
George. Right. Thank you, George. Right. So that's Catherine.
Catherine's
Chair.
put a hand up.
Catherine's put her hand up.
Oh, Catherine, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to continue to act in the role of Vice Chair for the time being. I just want to be clear that it would not be my intention to step into the role of Chair. So I would really appreciate if colleagues on the call could consider whether or not they would like to at some point in the future move into the Vice Chair, or whether they'd be prepared to step into the Chair when the time comes to do that. But I'm happy in the meantime to hold that responsibility and to provide any cover that's necessary in Andrew's absence. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks. Okay, then could we just move on to apologies and item number 2?
Apologies from, sorry, Chair, apologies from Hayley Mearns today.
Okay, and everybody else is here. Right, number 3, it's standard declaration of interest. Has anybody got any? No, I don't see anything. So that's it. We'll move on to what I was saying before. Can we please take item 10 as the next item before we go on to the item 4? The reasons for that will become clear as we go through it. Sandy, can I ask you to guide us through that one? It's on page 54 of your combined minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think to some extent, Andrew, we have dealt with some of this because the most pressing issue was to deal with the appointment of the Chair and the Vice Chair. Okay. But while we're looking at this item, we've obviously dealt with that. While we're looking at this, this paper also gives an update about where we are with the IJB Audit Committee's constitutional arrangements. We do try and review those on an annual basis, much the same as we try and review the Chair and the Vice Chair role on an annual basis, just to make sure we're always on top of things. But the Audit Committee's constitutional arrangements were reviewed and signed off by the IJB after much input from us in August 2022, i.e. relatively recently in the scheme of things. Many of you will probably remember that. So I think what we've kind of said here is we don't feel we really need to go through that in too much detail. Hopefully everybody's relatively comfortable with that. The third item in this paper is just flagging up we do have a development session on the 1st of February. Hopefully everybody's had a diary invite for that. And the paper sets out some suggested agenda items, and it includes items about risk management and risk scoring. We may bring into that discussion where we are in terms of formalising our risk appetite as well. But Chair, that's the main points I'd want to flag up about this paper.
Okay, I just had one question. Is this the right time to be looking at membership of the audit committee going ahead, given that there are a few movements and resignations and etc. out of the committee? Is this a good time to talk about that, seeing it's all to do with constitutional arrangements? Sandy.
Yeah, sorry, Gail's got a hand up. Gail, do you want to come in on that particular point?
Right, Gail, please.
No, okay.
No.
In that case, Andrew, I'll pick that one up. So yeah, worth noting right now that Peter Davison was previously a member of the audit committee, but Peter has become the IJB's vice chair. His first meeting as vice chair, I think, will be this afternoon. And as he becomes the vice chair of the IJB, he's no longer able to continue to be a member of the audit committee. Again, that's sort of just about trying to ensure the membership of the audit committee is impartial from the chairing and the vice chairing of the main IJB. So this afternoon at the IJB, we will look for a replacement for Peter Davison, and Peter was on the audit committee as one of the NHS representatives, and his replacement will come from that cohort as well, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a volunteer for that. But of course, we also know that Peter Burke, who is here with us today, has kind of let us all know that this will effectively, I think, Peter, be your last formal audit committee meeting. And aside from our thanks for that, which I think we'll pick up later on, we will need to, I think this afternoon's paper for the IJB is looking for a replacement for Peter as well. Now, at the moment, we haven't got an obvious volunteer for that, but somebody may well step forward this afternoon. We don't know yet.
Okay, fine, thank you. So, thanks for that. Has anybody got any questions about item 10?
Chair, we've got Gail.
Oh, Gail's,
Chair.
yeah, Gail's hands up. Right,
Sorry, Chair. It was
No,
really
right.
around the email correspondence last night about risk appetite.
Oh, yeah.
And I wondered if there was an opportunity to make a decision if we're going to have that extra item at the end of your development session on February as a one-item meeting. I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that, or if you want to discuss that with the committee at the moment.
I was going to bring that up at item 13, if that's okay, or do you want to do it now?
It's entirely up to yourself. It just so I didn't forget.
No. Yeah, okay. If it's all right with you, just to keep the sequence of thought going and the logical train of events, we'll pick that one up as part of item 13, and you can explain it then. But so going back to item 10, is everybody happy with that one? And what were they? Sorry, till I scroll to the recommendations are the reappointments in number 1, which has already taken place. Constitutional arrangements have already been reviewed in August and therefore are up to date. And the timing and proposed agenda for the next development session is also agreed, and that was published. So is everybody content with that set of recommendations? I don't see any dissent. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the 4A is the minutes of the previous meetings. That's back again to right. So I'll just go through them page by page. So item 4A, if people could shout out if they're unhappy with the so that's page 4 of the combined papers, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8 of that set of minutes. Sorry, I'm having a bother with my computer here. Right. Okay. And right. Okay, so that was the meeting on 22nd of September. So I don't hear any.
Chair, that was the minutes of the 24th of August 22.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm getting a bit. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. Okay. That was the minutes of the 4th of August. Yeah, I was forgetting we had a second meeting. So, sorry about that. Going back to the first set of minutes, there's no cut points on that one. So, the second meeting was that quick meeting we had for the approval of the financial statements, the annual audited accounts, and that was on the 22nd of September, and those are on page 9 and 10. And right, is everybody in agreement that those are a correct representation of the two sets of meetings as far as the minutes go? See anything? Okay, so moving on to item 4B, which is the action points, or the combined action points for all the meetings going forward. Quite a lengthy list, but maybe, Sandy, if you could highlight some of the important stuff to us that you want to bring to the committee's attention.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we're looking here at page 11 of the papers, the action points from various meetings. I suppose one of the things that is generally positive about this quite long list is there's quite a few things that we are greening out here. We have got a few of these things sorted out. That's my main comment on these. We have an item on the second page from the 24th of August 22, which is about sharing the digital terms of reference. We understand that has been complete and just hasn't quite been shared yet. We'll try and get that shared as soon as we can after this meeting, so that will hopefully sort itself out. But I think the crux is the work has been done. And the only other point I'd like to flag up, Chair, is the pretty much the last or the second last action points from 2019. These are both red. They've been there for a long time. They were about the remits of the audit committee and generally our overall performance management. We have got stuck in terms of trying to progress that, but Gail in particular will know that through the IJB's management team, we have actually had a chance in the last couple of months to work, think our way through this. In a kind of a more settled post-COVID environment, reflecting on a variety of things that have moved around in the governance of the IJB. And although I've not had time to share a position with yourselves, we have got that all kind of pretty much written up. I think, Gail, we probably discussed that at a executive management team meeting sometime towards maybe the middle of November. I just literally haven't had time to do that yet. So that will come out to everybody, before our next meeting, because we'll be getting that moved on. And just for Tony's reference, that also did tie in with some discussions we've had with the auditors as well. So I'll be sharing some of our thoughts with our internal auditors as well. So, Chair, that's the main updates on the action points. But happy to take any questions. And I know Peter's got his hand up.
Yeah, and I'm a bit confused. When did we agree? Was I asleep when we agreed to move to blue, red, amber, and green? And why is it different from the one that COSLA used? Because COSLA used brag. In fact, I was going to toss it in as a departing little hand grenade to suggest that we move to it. But their brag is completely different. Their blue is completed. Their green is on target. Their amber is off target but manageable, and their red is off target and unmanageable. And that's the only one that actually demands any sort of narrative as to whether we abandon it or what we do, what the action is, the remedial action is. And I'm just wondering, I'm finding this very bewildering because it's different. I think there are now 3 different ways of doing this. And so I'm wondering if we can have some consistency, or you can have some consistency in the future.
Okay, well, thanks, Peter. Well, obviously you've taken the opportunity to put that hand grenade in right now, and that's absolutely fine. So I haven't ever made any attempt to kind of align our colour coding with COSLA stuff, and it's not stuff I'm particularly looking at. You're probably right. We haven't seen much blue. We've always had blue on there as a separate resolution, and the separate resolutions would generally be things you're getting superseded. I don't particularly recall that we brought that one in recently. It may just be a case of us not using it, but we generally use green as done, amber kind of on its way or making good progress, and red's the ones that we have problems with. So the red is probably consistent across the board, but we have tended to use blue as something else different is happening. I can maybe have a look at the COSLA stuff to see if that's something that's simple and that we could easily apply to this as well. But I can have a look at that, certainly.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that.
See any other hands up? It's nice to see a lot of these greening out, so the list should get shorter as time goes on. Don't see any more hands, so without further ado, we'll accept those action items as a true representation of where we're going in the future. I'll move on to item 5, but that is actually not an item as such. There's a note on that due to the timing of the closure of the year 21-22 reporting and the appointment of a new external audit team. The plan will be brought forward for consideration at the April meeting next year. So you'll recall that we are getting a whole new bunch of auditors from Audit Scotland. I don't know, is there anything to share on that yet, Sandy, or is it too early yet?
Andrew, it's too early at the moment. Although we had our annual accounts wrapped up in the minutes that we've just seen from September, lots of other public sector bodies, councils and whatever have run all the way into November. So we were quite lucky to get out the way quite soon through Rachel and Mary. But the team that will be moving into it with Angus was still wrapping other things up. So that's partly why they're not here today, but also partly why the audit plan is not here. They're just still running a few months behind schedule. It'll catch itself up.
We'll hear about it early on in the year. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you for that. I'll move on to item 6, which is the internal audit report's follow-up actions. That's Sandy, that's you, page 15. Could you maybe give us a run through of the key items and key points there?
Yep, Chair. I will pick that one up. So this is a long list. I've got Riona Swanky on the call with us today. Riona's a member of the finance team and helps us oversee this list. I'm sure Riona, when she looks at it, thinks, oh my goodness me, this is a long list. It's 5 or 6 pages now. It grew and it grew. And we didn't manage to close things out during much of the last couple of years. We, of course, continue to add to it when we have things like our annual internal audit recommendations and things from 1 or 2 internal audit plans like the recent Commission Services one. So they're adding on at the bottom, and some of them are relatively current. We are getting a few things sorted out on this. There's a few greens, not as many greens as you saw in the action plan, but I'm hopeful that the not so much the threat, but the idea of bringing some reports back to the committee for a bit more of a review if they haven't been closed out is helping us to get a few actions closed out. And in this paper today, I think Appendix 2 does have a written update regarding the longest and overdue item, which is a financial management item from 2018. I can't really explain why it has taken so long to get that to this stage, but the appendix there does give, I think, us some comfort that work is happening on that, and it will get wrapped up quite soon. I think, Chair, I'm happy again to take any questions on this if there's particular things that people are looking to get a bit more detail in depth about. But I am hopeful that we're gradually going to start seeing this turn around, and one part of that is making sure that we keep on top of the new actions that come in, and we'll see that when we talk about the Commission Service Report in a few minutes.
Anybody got any questions on the list of items, Peter? Mark?
Yeah, it says, I'm trying to find it. It says, oh, that's right. Preliminary findings. This is at the bottom of page 25. Preliminary findings are shown at Appendix 1, and I couldn't find Appendix 1.
We're not on that yet.
I thought we were, sorry.
We're still on.
We're not talking about the appendix as well. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you didn't go over that, Sandy. I thought you were just dealing with the action list first.
Oh, right.
That's what I understood. Are we considering the SBAR report on the commission services as well? Because that's a fairly lengthy bit of work. So, what order do you want to do it in, Sammy?
Yeah, Chair, I'll come in. Peter, I think you're referring to Appendix 2 of this report.
Yes.
You are, yeah, and that is part of this internal audit follow-up actions. That's on page 24 and page 25. So the appendix. So I've circulated that workings as it was provided in the management groups inside the IJB. But the appendix itself was a very long list, a big spreadsheet of workings. And I think in the covering report, we've said that we wouldn't include the appendix because it had too much contractual detail and things like that. So I think it actually says that in the covering report, Peter.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for that, Peter. Yeah, it's quite an exhaustive report, and it did highlight a lot of issues with the service, but hopefully they've been put to bed now. Has anybody got any further questions on item number 5? Number 6, rather. No, right, we'll
Chair.
move on. Sorry?
Chair Tony Gaskin's got his hand up.
Sorry, Tony, right.
Yeah, thanks. It's just minor thing. It's something I noticed on page, well, the one that's page 19. Yeah, page 19 for both. Progression of the agreed improvement plan ANO 521. Notice that the revised date's December. So I suppose just highlighting that one, I do remember the audit report and there being a few things to sort out there. And it's just making sure that that's just highlighting that, Sandy. So if maybe someone could send I think that's one we would be looking for movement by the time of the next meeting. I notice it's not due yet, but I'm just hoping that that's actually kicking on now because there was quite a bit to get sorted, as I recall.
Yep, Chair.
It's INO 521 recommendation 3.
Yep, I see that issue, Tony. If you look in the comments column, which is the right-hand column,
Yeah.
you can see that the progress you were perhaps looking for is maybe not coming.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've read the top bit. I hadn't picked up the October 23.
Yeah. So that has proved to be one of those issues that is almost so wide-ranging within the partnership and the council, reliant on a number of things in the council systems working. You might, and I think the committee members will recall, there was issues about the software systems we're using and the migration to Eclipse, which has slowed us down a wee bit and has become not so much a bit of a hurdle for us to work through, but it's meant some of the solutions we hope would fall into place haven't happened as quickly as we might have. But we've been in late discussions with the Director of Finance of Angus Council about that, and he felt it was probably best for us to be a bit more upfront and reset the expectations for wrapping that up to next autumn. It is just taking us a long time to work through.
Yeah, I think, and just as a matter of principle, I suppose, does that leave us, presumably, with an operational risk? So rather than a strategic one. So it's going to be quite a while between the original recommendation. I mean, there's not much to be done if they can't do anything any quicker. I think it leaves us slightly exposed on that front, but that's what it is.
Yeah, Tony, we do have an operational risk there. We meet about every 4 to 6 weeks with a working group of council and partnership representatives working on that one. I don't think there's any realistic way we can bring that forward much beyond that. It's linked to the bullet point above, where we're also talking about making sure we've got the improvement plan in place, and we're hoping the improvement plan itself will be done by June 23 and then implemented by October 23.
Right, fine. That's the best we'll do, I think, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Right. Is there any? Okay. So just scrolling Okay, so going back to the recommendations of item 6, it's just recommended, simple enough. Notes the report and progress made to date in terms of delivering the planned responses. So are we, no objections to that one? Okay, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the internal audit plan progress report. And again, I think is that Tony?
Unless Sandy wants to. No, that's
Do you want to
fine.
do?
I'll fire away.
Okay,
So
thanks, Tony.
what we have, we're cracking on with things as you would hope and expect. So the first thing is you'll have seen the report at wasn't the last meeting, it was the meeting before on commission service providers, and as you can see, that's been finalised now. I wouldn't propose to spend too much time on that. The big piece of work that we've been waiting for a wee while because of the complexity of it, and poor Gal's been lumbered, if you like, with trying to herd cats and get a response on this one. So that's the biggest piece of work I want to focus on most, but we've got that as a separate item, so I'll not start on that now. But I will say that I know that it was a complex audit to do, and it's even more complex to try and sort it out, and that's why we did it. Only we did it because it was complex, it was intractable, and that takes longer to sort. So fine. The other one made it to this meeting for good reason, which is the workforce one, but that's well underway. We were waiting for the. I wanted to do it in tandem with the NHS Tayside one, and I'll just comment on the Angus one. So that's been a very positive experience. I'll be honest, it's been better than we expected because workforce planning hasn't, certainly from our NHS experience, and indeed with local authorities in truth, workforce planning hasn't been a particularly strong point, and the needs are greater than ever. But the feedback so far is it's I don't know, there'll obviously be lessons to learn, and you're tied in with organisations that have their own issues. But in terms of the IJB, that's been a very positive experience. So the audit, we'll bring that to the next meeting. And then the finance one, we've got the planning going for that one, and that'll be done by April 23 as promised. And certainly the workforce one, we're expecting the draft. I'm expecting to see that before Christmas and clear that. And as far as the agenda items concerned, that's that agenda item. That's the progress report, and we'll discuss the other reports in detail and separate agenda items.
Okay. Thank you, Tony, for that update. So, is there any questions? Gail's got a hand up. Gail?
Wasn't really a question, Chair. It was just to say that the feedback from the Scottish Government on the workforce plan from the partnership is actually on our website, if anybody hadn't seen it.
Yep.
I've seen quite a few of these, and they've not all been complimentary.
Oh, I think.
And yeah. So if it's good, then well done, because they're very positive.
I think that was previously circulated anyway, but
yes, I think they're very proud it was good, Andrew, in the fact that we've considering everything. You know, I think we had to struggle. We got one area that they suggested for improvement that we've actioned on, but there's no miracle here to recruiting the right staff. It's good to know that we're thinking of all the things that we can possibly do as well.
Yeah, there's not a section of the public service that isn't suffering from workforce. So everybody's chasing the same people. So it's good to hear that we're ahead of the pack, as it were. So if that's the right terminology. So can I just move on to, conscious of time here, and we're about halfway through the agenda. Some meaty things to come up in the future. So going straight to a recommendation, it's We're just asked to notice the substantive completion of 21-22 internal audit plan and the work undertaking relating to next year's 2022-23. So, yeah, I'm just going to say, if anybody objects, just raise your hand. But if I don't hear anything within 5 nanoseconds, I'll move on. Right, so on to... I'm conscious that Gail wants to get this item. I'm hoping to bring it in at 10, but if it drags on a bit, I'll bring you in earlier because I know you're needing a decision on that risk management statement. So I'll just keep an eye on the clock. But I'll move on to number 8 at the moment, which is Tony alluded to, is the internal audit report specifically on the commissioned services, which is 0622. Who's talking to that one?
Yep, Chair, I'll pick that one up.
Okay, right, Sandy,
Okay,
thank you.
Right, so everybody, this report has been shared previously. We had a draft version, but this is kind of the final version of it. It's has been seen by the committee before. One of the points to note is that in terms of management teams, George Bowie has now retired and Eunice McLennan is going to pick the work up and the action points for this up. The actions are all set out in section from about page 38, 39 of this report. I think it's a good set of actions. It's a good report. I think people involved with delivering these services and managing these services will ultimately find that the taking forward of the actions will leave us in a stronger and more positive position. We have got a lot of funds that we invest through commission services, so this will be a kind of help with the overall management of that part of our service delivery. But otherwise, Chair, just happy to take any questions on it.
Okay, I'll open that one out.
My only question, Chair, has been answered already. I just was looking for clarification on who the new risk owner would be. That's really helpful. Thanks very much, Sandy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was quite an intensive, quite a rigorous audit of the function, and they did throw up lots and lots of basic stuff. It was a good exercise in that respect. I think that we've got a more robust service and a more robust function, and what deals with quite a lot of the budget of this partnership, as Sandy mentioned. So hope you've all had a chance to read it. Has anybody got any specific questions? Okay, right, that's good. So the recommendations are: notes the findings that the committee notes the findings of the final version of the internal audit into commissioning services, and requests that the follow-up actions described in the management responses monitored through the regular internal audit follow-up actions to the report committee. Our big list. Is everybody happy? That's a good way to monitor it. Right, thank you. We shall move on to item 9, which is the governance action plan. Again, I think that's you, Sandy. I'm sorry, Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So again, this is one of our regular reports. I appreciate it looks very similar to the internal audit follow-up report that you saw 2 or 3 items ago, but it is issues coming from different places in our governance arrangements. This is more generic issues rather than specific points we're following up on in terms of internal audit reports. This list is still just about being held to a page. We've got a bit of movement on 1 or 2 things, which we've described at sections 3.2 and 3.3 of the report. And we've got an appendix 2 here that sets out where we are with some of our working arrangements in terms of our integrated working arrangements, which is a long-standing issue we were trying to provide an update to the audit committee about, and hopefully people feel that's enough of an update for us to confirm that action is now progressed sufficiently. And we've also, in section 3.3, after discussion with our Tony's team, recognised that the signing off of the integration scheme earlier on in this calendar year and its recent approval by the Scottish Government really takes us as far as we can go. Realistically, at this stage in terms of clarifying our overall governance and accountability arrangements, i.e. the effort that went into updating the integration scheme has effectively done that job and creates a new baseline for us. So that's a couple of updates at 3.2 and 3.3, but otherwise happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, I'll throw that one open to the meeting. Nope. Ah, Catherine just got in the nick of time there.
Sorry, I was a wee
Okay.
bit slow. Hardy hand. I just wondered if there was any other context, Sandy, around the lack of update for services, just given that it is highlighted as a significant level of priority. So I just wondered if I needed to hear about that.
Yeah, Catherine, I've maybe not been as detailed in my response to that. I think one of the problems is Jill's got a hand up. I'll bring Jill in a second. It's a complicated issue in terms of we've got to liaise with other people, but one of the reasons we haven't got quite as far as we hoped is really the capacity to just get these things across the line. And I maybe haven't been quite clear about that in here. But anyway, I'll bring Jill in because I know Jill has been working on this.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, there has been some work done on this, Catherine, just from the heads of services across the 3 partnerships. We have got or had a process whereby the reports from a care clinical professional governance perspective have certainly been shared between Dundee and Angus in terms of the lead partner function. And that seems to be working quite well. We've got a further meeting with the heads looking at kind of developing that flowchart to keep it simple. I think it's next week, and we would aim to have that completed by February next year. So things have been progressing around that.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of hands up. What order it was? Hang on.
I think it was Gail first.
Yeah, I know you're first. You're
Oh, am I?
number
Oh,
one.
right. Oh, all right. I'll just being
You're
a
number
gent.
one on my list.
It is. I'm just wondering. We have been struggling with this. I know there's progress, and thanks for that, Jill. I'm just wondering if there's any learnings we can take from anywhere else, like Glasgow or Edinburgh, if they've been struggling with the same problem, and whether they've got, call it best practice, have they resolved the issues? If we can learn from what they've been doing and how they've achieved it.
But I think, Peter, there is discussions going on at the National Heads of Service meeting as well around shared learning, not just around this, but around a number of other areas as well. It isn't something that anybody's got right, is where we're at. So I think everybody's looking at what they're doing and then how we share that across the national heads to see what is working and what is the best way. But as far as I'm aware, there isn't a national direction in terms of this is what you should be doing. There's guidance, and that's what we're all kind of interpreting in our own ways. But yes, it is something that would be good to look at nationally. I don't know actually, Gail, if that's something that Health Social Care Scotland could maybe lead on.
Gail, you've got your hand up anyway.
Yeah.
Is it on the same
Yes.
point or a different point?
Yes, Chair. Jill's right. There isn't a national direction there. The 3 chief officers in Tayside have got our heads together, though, to look at this. And I'm meeting with Vivian Davidson, it's either tomorrow or Friday, around bringing Vivian back to progress a piece of work here on behalf of the 3 partnerships. So hopefully I can persuade her to do a bit of work, because she knows a lot about what's going on nationally as well, and what has progressed and what hasn't. So that conversation will take place this week.
Good. Okay. Thanks for that.
Did you have a point of your own, Gail? You had your hand up anyway.
No, it was just to say about Jill, but we've asked as well nationally. Jill's quite right. People are doing their own thing there, Chair.
Right, thank you, Gail. Has anybody got any other questions? Right, we'll move on to the recommendations. It's note the report and progress made to date in terms of delivering the planned response and request a progress report. regarding outstanding governance actions related to the governance documentation to be brought forward to this meeting in April 2023. Right, we've done item 10 up. I would ask the committee's indulgence at this point. I want to move on to that item 13, risk management, so that we can discuss an item of business that will affect us, and we need to make a decision on it. So without further ado, I'd like to go straight on to page 60 of the combined report and look at the risk management report. Who's talking on that one?
I'm happy to take that, Chair.
Okay, Jill, thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, this is our mid-year update in relation to risk management that we agreed that we would bring back to Audit Committee. I guess as a partnership in an IJB, we have taken a few months to try and get a bit more focus around risk management within the partnership and within the IJB. So we've had a couple of development sessions both around the risks and the risk appetite. The report also includes a current position in terms of our strategic risks, which we also report to the NHS Tayside Care Governance Committee, as well as the Strategic Risk Management Group. Just picking up on the report that we heard about earlier in terms of the commission service failure, you'll note that we do have that as a strategic risk, and Sandy's confirmed that Eunice has taken on the management of that risk. So there will be something that we'll need to look at in terms of that risk and the report to make sure that if there's any other mitigating actions that we can consider as part of the report, that we include them in the strategic risk going forward. Just bringing committee's attention to some of the new and emerging risks that are documented there, in particular the proposed industrial action that as a partnership we are keeping a very close eye on, both from a health perspective locally, but also from other health providers, for example Scottish Ambulance Service, that will impact on our ability to deliver services. So we have done a bit of work around that and have obviously contributed to all of the relevant meetings to discuss that, and plans are in place should any industrial action go ahead. Rota disconnect was also another one that was discussed at our clinical care and professional governance group, just in relation to the proposals of planned power outages going forward into the new year. And we agreed that at that point it wouldn't be added as a strategic risk, and that we would manage that locally through our resilience planning groups, both within the council and within NHS Tayside. We also spoke about the National Care Service, and again, for the reasons outlined in the paper, we agreed that we wouldn't record that as a strategic risk at the moment. And the community pharmacy was another one, just to highlight just in relation to some of the pressures, and I guess it does in some ways link to the sustainability of primary care internal audit and the need to really be clear around what does that refer to, because community pharmacy is very much part of primary care. So we need to now, on the basis of reworking the sustainability of primary care audit, we need to now do a bit of work around community pharmacy as well. We've also added a bit in a development session on risk appetite and the risk training, along with our strategic risk profile and a copy of the improvement action plan. So happy to take any questions on that, and I don't know if you or Gail want to comment on the emails from excuse me, last night.
All right. I don't see any immediate questions apart from, Catherine's got her hand up. Catherine, have you got a question for us?
Yes, firstly, before I ask my question, I'm not sure if I've missed an email that's been read times
No.
if all members were
Right.
supposed to have seen that.
Right.
I haven't seen it.
Good.
But the questions were around the proposal for a primary care board, which are contained, I think, in this paper. And I just wondered, because I'm a bit confused around the governance, how that reports in then, where it fits with the governance. My understanding is that primary care is a delegated function and that the IJB is responsible for its delivery, but the primary care board appears to be of the NHS Tayside governance mechanism and talks about reporting to the board. So I wasn't quite sure where it fitted in and at what point and in what mechanism the IJB here will be cited on what comes out of that and what's being reported there. It might have been helpful to have some sort of a flow chart or something just for my able to follow that. And the other point was just a point of, I suppose, clarity on page 64 with my hat on as the Chief Social Officer. The issue around CTOs and DOs, that risk was raised in the Chief Social Officer report specifically and was discussed, I think, at some length at the IJB last time it met. So it was just to remind people at this meeting that issue has been discussed at the IJB itself and it hasn't just gone through the Clinical Care Governance Forum. So you all will have some line of sight on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and apologies, I did skip over that one, not deliberately, so apologies for that, and thank you for bringing that. In relation to the primary care board, I think and Gail, I'm sure you want to come in. I think it's fair to say that as a result of the internal audit report, we are doing a bit of revamping of the primary care board and to relook at the governance structure. Sorry, I'm going to wait to lose my voice, Gail. I don't know if you want to take over.
Oh, I know. I'm feeling really bad. Everybody with the sore throats, I think I'm taking some responsibility there. I've had that bug going around, not strepy, I hasten to add, but a lot of the bugs. I noticed Catherine, I think, struggling a wee bit there. Yes, I'm not popular. In relation to the primary care board, we already have one, Catherine. We already have a board, but Jill's quite right there. What we really need is a board that's a single forum for operational and strategic decision making for primary care, and that has the responsibility and authority for managing the risk. As far as Angus goes, that's the strategic leadership role that we're talking about today in the delegated function. This afternoon on the agenda, we've got mental health, and that's where that lead partner situation needs to be absolutely clear to everybody. Hence where I'm talking about bringing Vivian back to look at the lead partner agreement and arrangement Tayside. But in relation to primary care, Catherine, I don't think we've got all the right membership, or certainly not the right people there to make the decisions on the right priorities at the moment that we really need to strengthen. So that bit is slightly different, but I can have an off-record conversation with Catherine about primary care if she really wants to. The other challenge I would like to raise is in relation to the risk appetite session and the development sessions that we've had. We made really good progress at our development session, and we've agreed what our approach and our risk matrix is. Where I've come across a problem here is we don't have another audit committee until April. Now, as we agreed at our session, we said that we would go along to our CCPG for endorsement of the risk appetite statement, and the intention is that would go to the January the 9th CCPG. Unfortunately, there will be a gap until April if we don't agree something now before we can approve the risk appetite statement. And in between that, we have various other committees, including the risk management committee, etc., that I would have liked to have shared our risk appetite with. So the two thoughts, there's no emails going back. It was just really this morning, Catherine, to hijack this agenda item for this morning and add that to our meeting about We haven't really had a development session as such, or a one-off meeting for the audit committee. So do we have that? Do we not have that? We've never done it before, appreciating we've done it for an IJB, but we haven't had to do it for the audit committee. Or do we have an extra audit committee on the same day as that development session in February, a quick one-item session about the risk appetite? Or really, what would the committee want to do? Because I'm quite reluctant to wait until April for that approval. And that was just to share that thought with the committee.
So, yeah, so that's, thank you, Gail. Peter and Tony, I'll come to your points later on. I'd rather get this one sorted out first. Yeah, that dispels the mystery of the missing emails. So it's just a quick exchange between Gail, myself, and Sandy about the logistics of solving this problem. Basically, it's a simple enough question, but I've got some questions to ask about appetite anyway. I know we developed that in the development session. So, how confident are we that that risk appetite is nearly oven ready, as the man would say? And in which case, is it just a formality that we approve it at all these various committees on the 9th of January at the clinical care partnership, and 15th of February, I think you mentioned, for the other sort of NHS Tayside, or is there some work to be done? If it goes to the committee, the Care Governance Committee, will there be a lot of rework after that? So that was my question. But what Gail is asking, and what we need to do, is have this approved before ideally the 15th of February, but possibly the 22nd of February, which is our next IJB meeting. So it was proposed that we could add that on as a single agenda item on the 1st of February development session, which would be a neat way to solve the problem. But we don't want to take up the whole development session talking about risk appetite. So my question to, I guess, Sandy and Gail and Jill is the risk appetite nearly finished? In which case we could consider the 1st of February. If not, we'd have to have a separate meeting if it was going to be a substantial sort of thing. So we were... Chair,
can I come in here, Chair?
Yeah.
Because obviously the risk appetite is critically linked to our strategic priorities of the IJB. And we're currently working on that at the moment. So I think the timing is really crucial. In relation to it being nearly ready, it absolutely is ready. Under the 5 headings, we got agreement to all of them. I think we ended up with 3 opens and 2 cautious, and there was no dissent and no further discussion required. As everybody here probably knows, this is a whole adaptive process, and it will be reviewed and updated on an annual basis. What I didn't want is to wait till April and then suddenly we're having to review it again later on in the year, So to me, I think, we just need to agree how we're going to do that, how we're going to record it. But I don't think there was any dissent.
Right.
I'm not quite sure. Tony may want to come in and correct me if I'm wrong here.
Karen, you've got your hand up. Is it a point of order?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I just want to interrupt, and I'm sorry I'm jumping ahead of everyone else. I'm just conscious that there's no further update in terms of risk appetite within the papers, and I think, to be honest with you, I think it's a discussion that possibly has to be taken offline and not in the meeting as to what the steps are to be taken forward. I'm just conscious that there's no further information there, a paragraph that's there, albeit Gail has given the background in terms of that. And I think the decision needs to be taken, is there a requirement for a special meeting or how that's taken forward? But I don't think that the discussion is appropriate to discuss that formality at the moment, because there's no decision being made on there. So I think once it's been decided, then the next steps would then be taken forward as to how we're going to deal with that within that particular point
Okay,
in time.
I don't particularly want to have a yet another meeting to decide when we're going to have the next meeting. Can this be done as any other competent business and still keep within the remit of the audit committee's terms of reference? Can we take that out?
I would bring Tony in here because
Yeah,
we need formal approval. It needs
we
to
do.
be dealt with through formal approval.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, but I don't want too many meetings.
I'm
So,
still conscious, Chair, obviously, that I think members should be cited on any relevant paperwork and report that obviously has the recommendations contained within it at a special meeting or another meeting in due course. And obviously that's probably a conversation that could be had post this meeting.
your opinion, Gail, at this point?
I think, yeah, so for me, I come from a different background, so I've no comment to make on kind of the procedural aspect of this meeting, because that's very much run along council lines. I think the health boards tend to be slightly more relaxed, but fine. So, you know, if that's the advice we've got, that's fine. I think what I would say then, if we're not to be drawn into detailed conversation, is I'll have an offline conversation with Gail, because I think there are certain principles which I will not think I can enunciate without going off piste. One is, if you're having a risk appetite, the so what question. So what does it mean if you're open? What score are you aiming at? What happens if you're out with that? What are the consequences? And it's probably similar to the discussion we had a while back. I would be looking to make sure that we understand the consequences of the risk appetite. So that if, for example, you're above appetite, does that mean increased scrutiny, increased resources? And if you're below appetite, do we do? So that sort of thing I think would be a useful conversation to have. And the other one is just a general piece of advice I'm giving all my clients. The risk environment is exceptionally tricky at the moment. So you have to have a constant eye on your risk appetite, because the world's not getting any, and I always use the analogy of a flood barrier. The waters are rising. But I think that's a conversation I can have offline with Gail. And obviously happy to take Karen's advice in terms of procedure, because that's not my field of authority at all. But presumably we can, you can organise a meeting that's doable.
Oh, yeah.
As a decision.
Okay.
And that would presumably comes from the authority of the board, not the audit committee itself.
Okay, it's been raised, and it's I guess it's going to be a thing we maybe want to take offline and come up with a solution to this. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's just procedure. As Gail has said, 100% of the work's been done already, so we need to get some. Obviously, this is not the place to be doing it, but at least everybody in the committee is aware of what we're going to be asking potentially in the future. If that's okay to leave it at that point just now, but we need to have a quick Gail, Sandy, and whoever else, Tony, to decide the best way to solve this problem. But it doesn't sound like it's a big deal. I don't want to take up the meeting discussing that, because we've got a lot to get through anyway. Are you happy with that interim
Yes.
situation
Chair,
at the
thank
moment?
you.
We
Yes,
can sort this out with the meeting. So back to the risk report itself. We've had Jill's response. We've had people's hands up in the air. Peter and Tony have had their hands in the air for a while. Peter, you were first on the list.
I don't wish to appear pedantic, but at the top of Appendix 2, the red, blue, green and amber are as specified by COSLA. Just a point. And the other thing is lines 1 and 2, they're basically the same issues. I mean, they're different issues, but they're the same progress. It's ongoing, improving existing controls, but one is red and one is green. And I think that where it's red, it demands some narrative as to what's going to be happening or not. That's all my 2 points there.
repeat it up. Thank you.
Okay. Tony?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. One is just I think this is a really good report, and we criticise a lot, so sometimes I think it's worth saying that this is giving a lot of information. So that would be the first point to make. There's obviously a lot of thought gone into this, and that you might think that's just a normal thing that you should get, but again, as with the workforce plan, some of these don't show that degree of thought. So that's something to note, I think, and I'd want to record that. There was a point that Catherine made about the primary care group. We could pick it up on the primary care on now, but there's a phrase I'm using a lot, which is governance with purpose. So governance is a means to an end. It's a means to achieving the things we need. And in what is an extraordinarily complex, interrelated environment, as we find with mental health and with primary care, if you've got a group that we think can actually do the job and mitigate the risk, that is the most important thing. And we can sort out, I mean, it's a very good point Catherine makes, we need to have that. And possibly the way that some of that feedback can come through is through this risk report. But I mean, there's no reason why that group can't feed into the clinical governance, and this risk report can't actually ask that group, which is something we've talked about in the primary care report, to give its opinion on the risk and actually be heavily involved in saying, is the risk all right? Are the controls working? Are the actions likely to mitigate the risk and provide exactly the sort of assurance we need? But the most important thing is, bluntly, if you've got a group of people that can sort it, let them get on with it, because no one has been able to sort it for quite a while. And that's the big thing. The other one is just an observation, is there's one risk there that just looks really quiet. And I'm sure there's a lot of history, but it looks like it's being managed down, which is the nano, I've lost it. The nano probes, the Roche glucose nanometer.
Yeah.
It just looks like a really weird risk for a strategic body. Everything else is really kind of strategic and about, and then you've got this kind of very specific operational risk, which I don't pretend to understand, but it just looks quite odd in context. And I suppose you'd expect that if it's an operational risk that's high enough to be considered strategic, you would probably want assurance that that's being managed down, because if it's an operational risk that's big enough to hit our risk register, that probably means the operational risk is really quite big. So I just wonder if there's some kind of trajectory for getting that off them, which is not to say it shouldn't be on now, but when you see an operational risk hanging around for a while like that, it just looks a bit strange.
There is, Tony, sorry, I was remiss of me not to mention that. So we did have discussion at CCPG around that and agree that it was now an operational risk and it would be moved off of the strategic risk register. And I think just in relation to, I love that phrase, governance with purpose. I think that we can add the word purpose to a number of words at the moment. I think that would help. But and hopefully Gail and Sandy will agree that part of the review of the terms of reference for the primary care board is absolutely to have that purpose and the accountability and responsibility as well. So hopefully the revamp come tomorrow we'll start to notice the changes around that.
Gail, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Jill's beat me to it actually. That's absolutely right. The primary care board meets tomorrow. And Tony, like yourself, I was at the risk management committee yesterday and our report was commended. The only issue was the issue we raised about our reporting of our risk appetite.
Right, thank you. A timely reminder, Gail, that we have to sort that out. Yeah, I did raise that Glaxman, whatever, nanometer at the strategic planning meeting, but I didn't get the same response as we got today, but I'm glad to see it's resolved now. It does seem sticking out there like a sore thumb on that list. Okay, has anybody else got any further questions on risk? It's nice to see this report finally hitting us. It's the first time I've seen anything as extensive as this, so it's really good. So going back to the recommendations, if there are no further questions, there's 4 of them. So the committee is asked to review and accept the strategic risk profile, rating matrix, strategic risk improvement plan, acknowledge the progress made in relation to internal audit review and risk management, and accept the new and emerging strategic risk, and also acknowledge that the IJB audit committee members have attended risk appetite training and require that an additional session be arranged in 2023. Okay, that's accepted. So we'll move on to, or rather back to item number 11, which is the external audit annual report. Is that yours, Sandy?
Yes, Chair, I'll take that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll remember from our September meeting, we saw the annual accounts report by the external auditors. They made a few recommendations, a very short list actually of recommendations, and we said we provide. We said what we would do, and this is an update on our response. Some of the things are not closed out yet. That's not particularly surprising given timelines. It was only September we talked about them, and you can see that all on page 57. So happy to take any questions, but I don't particularly perceive any problems with these, and they should all kind of fall into place in due course.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. I think you remember from the last meeting that when we got the report from the external auditors, this was a very good report for the IJB, and we were very pleased with the very few pickup points that came out of it, and these are here. So if anybody's got any questions about it, raise your hands. Otherwise, I'll go straight to the recommendation, which is that we consider and note the attached external audit report, action plan, including that further updates be brought forward at the April 2023 meeting. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 12. And again, I think that's you, Sandy, one more time.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Hopefully another relatively straightforward report. We've previously agreed on the back of other recommendations to share an update about where we are with our governance documentation. And that's all set out in the Appendix 1. Highlights that many of the documents are in the public domain, that one or two are not, that we've got one or two things that are relatively current, or one or two things that do need a wee bit of remedial work. And the idea, obviously, in the long run is this will appear as an annual report and just be able to demonstrate that everything is in the public domain and up to date. But as I say, not everything's quite there at the moment. But hopefully it provides some kind of reassurance about where all our documentation is. For my part, in the core part of the finance work, we have got our financial regulations that haven't been reviewed for some time. You can see that if you look in detail, they were last reviewed in March 2016. That does seem like a long time ago, well, partly because it is, but it is worth noting that we do rely on, for much of our business, the financial regulations of NHS Taste and Angus Council, because all our approvals, all our processing of purchases, they are being channeled through the two parent organisations. So though it feels like it's quite a long time since it's reviewed, so much of our business goes through the partner organisations, and we are heavily using their financial regulations, which of course kept up to date separately. But Chair, again, this will be an annual report. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
No questions that I can see. It's good to see this tabulated so that we can see at a glance the regulations that are governing a lot of the activities that we do. So it's quite a useful document to have as a reference, and all the links are there as well. So if anybody has the time, they can go and read all that stuff. So I'll just move to the recommendation on this one, that the IJB Audit Committee consider that this report notes the documentation that needs to be progressed and notes that annual updates will be included in our annual work plan. Okay, thank you. And jumping over to item number 14, to what hopefully is another straightforward report. Who's speaking to that? It's the directions. Is that?
Yeah. Oh, Sandy, if you want to do it.
Is that Jill or Sandy?
On you go, Jill.
You do a double act, and if I lose my voice,
Okay.
and I mean, it's another straightforward report, first report again for the audit committee to consider. This is based on some of the reports that have gone to the IJB recently and the associated directions with them. So we've had 5 directions that have gone to NHS Tayside, and the report just highlights the status of those reports. So 2 haven't started and 3 remain work in progress as it currently stands. I think it is fair to say that directions is still relatively new from a parent organisation perspective, and I think it will take a bit of time in terms of working that through, but really glad to be bringing this first status report around that, and hopefully going forward things will move on and we'll see more directions and also more progress around them as well. But happy to take any questions, and I don't know if Sandy wants to add anything to that.
Jill, only that I think you're right. This report will perhaps evolve a wee bit. This is our first time of showing the monitoring. We said we'd do it half yearly, and maybe we'll get feedback from here. Maybe the authors, Jill, myself, Gail, whoever contributing to this will maybe say, oh, let's bring this into it. Let's put that in the table or whatever. So I think we'll maybe see it evolve a wee bit, but hopefully it's a useful tool for us in the long run.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. It's good to see this document at last for the first time. We've been talking about directions for a while, and there's been some work going on in the background, but this gives us a very clear picture and an easy way to monitor how these directions are going. So I'm quite happy to see this report coming up and being reviewed on a 6-monthly basis. So in fact, that's what the recommendations are. Okay, we've got 2 questions. We've got one from Catherine and then followed by Peter second. So Catherine.
Thank you. It is a very helpful report to see, and obviously we're kind of ploughing a new route with this, but I did wonder whether or not there was any possibility of, as the reports go on, we get a sense of how we compare in terms of our use of directions to other IJBs. And I know that there was some previous work nationally, obviously, mapping out the use of directions, but just in terms of the IJB and the audit committee being able to benchmark to some extent whether or not what we are seeing is kind of usual practice in that regard. And I'm sure that there'll be national conversations that officers are involved in that would maybe be able to give us a bit of insight into that.
Yeah, Peter. Sorry, Jill, we respond to that one. Yeah.
Point, Catherine, in terms of that, and I think just to give some level of, it obviously will depend on what reports are going to what IJBs, but for example, the primary care premises and the PSIF one from the October IJB, I certainly linked up with the authors of the reports for Dundee and Perth, and we shared the direction so that we can make sure that where there are papers that are going across the 3 partnership and IJBs, that actually we are doing the same thing, because there would be nothing more confusing that if Angus puts a direction in for something and Dundee and Perth have a very similar or same paper and they don't put a direction in. So that's certainly the way that we're trying to work across where there are kind of similar reports going. But it's something that, again, we could look at for other types of reports, Catherine. But I do regularly look at other IJB websites and see what papers have gone and what they've put a direction with, just for my own learning as well. But yeah, I think across the 3, we're certainly trying to engage a bit more around what is requiring a direction and getting a bit of consistency, hopefully.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, I was interested, Jill. I know these are early days and we've only just really kicked this off this year, but all the directions at the NHS, they're under Angus Council. I wondered if there was a particular reason for that or not.
It's just the nature of the reports that have gone to the IJB, Peter, that have required a direction, and I'm sure in terms of papers that are coming forward for future IJBs, there will be directions required for the council as well, but it's just purely the nature of the papers that have gone recently.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no further questions, I'd move on to recommendations, which is review the Details of the directions issued by Angus Health and Social Care Partnership beginning from January 2022, and also request that a further update be prepared for the IJB Audit Committee in June of 2023. So, okay, no, we subjected to that. Right, on to item 15, which is we've got 15 minutes left, and it's a fairly intense and rigorous review of the primary care sustainability. Who's going to lead on that one? Is it Tony?
Chair, I'll quickly introduce it because I've got my name on the report. We've alluded to this once or twice in this meeting probably already. This was a big audit that was done. Tony's referenced the it was I can't remember if you used the word complex, but if you didn't, that's probably what you were implying. A complex report to write, but also a complex report to respond to and work out the kind of improvement actions. It's an audit that's got interest across Teesside. It was a shared audit, really done not just for us in isolation, but done with other partners as well. And you can kind of see that actually in the covering note, because the section 3 of the report does capture some of the narrative that was shared inside some of the NHS Teesside papers. There wasn't much point us kind of reinventing the wheel on that one. We were just trying to share, a position in terms of introducing the document. It's still we're still drafting our final responses to this report, and again, that's one of the things that Tony alluded to. We need all partners and parties to kind of sign up to the action responses to make sure we can take them through. So that's where we are. Gail, I know you've been quite involved in this audit as well. Do you want to add in any other kind of thoughts before we maybe open up to questions?
Yes, this has taken a lot of my time, as I'm sure you can all imagine. In relation to the audit, I presented to NHS Tayside, to the Audit and Risk Committee, along with Stuart Lyle, the Director of Finance. I've also been to the NHS Tayside Care Governance Committee, and it will go to the Primary Care Board tomorrow for any amendments, any changes that are required to be made prior to their support and sign-off. I think it was Tony alluded to this earlier by saying how complex and multifaceted this report was. It covers many disparate areas in primary care and the whole complexity of primary care. But Tony, to quote you, it's about governance with purpose. And what we need to do is ensure that the actions that are required will be able to mitigate all the risks. You can see the list of actions that have been attached there, and the majority of them have my name to follow that through, which I will be looking for support from the Primary Care Board. Hence, we need to get their terms of reference absolutely correct. But as we've said earlier, we have 3 priority areas, and that includes HR, IT, digital work, and workforce. And it's ensuring they also support us with this. The wider issues and the wider implications of this are not to be underestimated, everybody. So I say that at every meeting. People listen. Hope's not a plan, Tony. I'm well aware of that. But it's trying to ensure that they're listening and that they are supporting us and joined up with us. The good thing is the governance. I am reporting everywhere. So if it doesn't happen, all committees will know about it. I think that's suffice to say, Sandy.
I'll just add, Gail, unaccountably, you forgot to add estates into your list of people that needed to help, and possibly I was pleased to see the direction in the previous paper, because bluntly, that's probably the sort of blunt instrument we need in these circumstances. But yeah, from my perspective, I don't think there's a lot of information in there. There's nothing I'd want to add particularly. I'd hope the report is self-explanatory. I think it's easier to point to the problems than it is to solve them, which is why I'm an audit officer. But hopefully it does. I think just setting out the issues, being outside and just setting out all the issues, I would hope just gives people a framework to really take this forward. And
Yep.
the only other thing I would say is that although it looks like there's a lot to do, we did actually find a lot of good work happening. It was the coordination of that good work and learning from each other when people were doing good things and spreading good. So joint solutions to problems we can't solve and spreading of solutions where we can solve them. So that's all I'd want to kind of add before questions come up.
Right. Before I put it on to, before I open it to questions, which is a couple of hands up there. Yeah, I was glad to see this report because, like everybody, we hear a lot about primary care, primary services, and sustainability and problems, and it's kind of an increasing and growing concern at various meetings. So it's good to see this finally documented as a clear list of actions to be taken forward in one place. I welcome this review, and it did help me understand the situation a bit more. Catherine, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I had picked up a couple of wee typos, I think. So firstly on page 75, yeah. So I think in the main report, the cover report indicated that it was an agreement, a joint commission between Perth and Kinross, Angus and NHS Tayside, but I see that the report itself also appears to include Dundee as a key partner. So I was assuming that that was just a typo in the cover report, and that Dundee were also jointly commissioning this piece of work. And the other aspect is on page 79. Gail is still given her title as interim chief officer. I think by the time this report was in progress,
Yeah,
I think
I
that she had perhaps had her confirmation, albeit that it took a very long time to come through, but I think she was chief officer by that time. So I had just picked up those points, thought given that this is still a draft final report, there's maybe some opportunity to tweak those bits. But my question relates to, and again, it's just that bit about, you know, my brain not quite mapping out the governance of this issue. And I know we touched on that under item 13 earlier. But I suppose it would be helpful for IJB members in Angus to understand the connect better between the oversight of this piece of work and the local responsibility for overseeing and decision making in relation to it. It's really, really welcome, I think, that there's clearly a robust response being heavily supported by colleagues in NHS Tayside and across the partnerships. And I think that that's absolutely to be commended. Local voting members on IGBs, for example, might have a role or not in relation to the primary care board, whether in fact they should, or whether that's a completely separate thing, which would be populated by clinicians, etc. So I'm just not familiar enough, I think, with the proposed structure and the existing structure around the primary care board to make a judgment about that, and just wondered if there's anything else that this group might need to know to be able to understand that a bit better.
I'm going to pick up the initial.
Sorry, Tony. Gail had her hand up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in terms of the response, Dundee got it for free, basically. Everyone else had it, and it was mine. I mean, I do the plans for all of them, so I should have maybe. I know. I'm just generous, but I mean, there was no point excluding Dundee with everyone else chipping in. I mean, it's just the way it went. Sure. Nothing funny. The way we work, there are things, you know, where Angus has learned from what Dundee's done. It's just the way it went. I think the report was issued at the point where Gail was interim manager, which was back in May, and we just haven't changed it since. But we'll get that sorted for the final. I think in terms of the governance, it's your governance. It's up to you. I mean, the terms of reference need to be right. I think that there's something really important about what that group does. And that's the most important thing, because we've got to sort this risk. And then probably the other thing I would emphasise is it's not just about GPs. I think that's so important. So it's really important that this group does the job.
Yeah.
How it then reports in is up to you. You do have essentially a clinical care governance committee that it could report through, but you also, as I said earlier, have the risk report. So it could be back up to that. I think having what for that group would be 4 formal lines of account reporting, maybe more. That's kind of up to you and up to them. The important thing, to be quite honest, is there's enough for them to get on with that they have to start mitigating the risk. That's the most important and urgent thing. And I think if they report on how they've done that, I'm sure there's many ways that Angus could absorb that into its own governance structures without necessarily creating formal lines of accountability, as long as the reporting happens.
Yeah.
And the most important thing, and I'll go back to that governance with purpose comment, do you have the ability as an organisation to influence how that group does it? Do you understand how it's doing its work? Do you understand whether that risk is being mitigated? And absolutely above all, is the risk actually being mitigated? Because it's one of, and Gail and I have had a discussion about what you do when a risk is sitting at 25 for that long. So it's a very valid point, and it needs to be absorbed into the structures. Okay. What you don't want to do is create anything that gets in the way of that group doing the business, because you need that risk down if you possibly can in a hurry. So I think it's a very good point, but there's waste. So I'll just suppose really advocate a light touch so that you get the information you need without necessarily over bureaucratising the process and getting in the way of that group getting on with what is a fundamentally important piece of work.
Right. Thank you, Tony, for that. I've got 5 minutes left to go. I've only got 2. I want to say something at the end of the meeting, and Gail's waving her hand about. I don't want to end up a protracted discussion on this item, but is there, Gail, have you got a specific point you want to make?
Tony's quite right. Dundee didn't commission this, Catherine. I was, I think, in an interim position when Tony and the team started, but I was definitely in a permanent position when the audit was concluded. I'm not quite sure the start date. However, in relation to what we're discussing about the Primary Care Board, at present, the strategic decision making currently sits with all the IJBs. They are all doing that. And what we really want to do is have a Primary Care Board with a single forum for strategic decision making. Now, ultimately, we need them to have meaningful operational engagement at their own local IJBs, and I want them to still have a responsibility for that, not advocate all of this over to Angus IJB. So we need to be absolutely clear what that lead partner means in practice, so people are clear about that. At the moment, roles and responsibilities are not clear, hence we're revising them, and Jill alluded to that earlier. That will be on the agenda tomorrow. We need that flow of assurance to be clear, but we need it to change. And the roles and responsibilities need to actually be achievable for people as well. And I'm talking about the priority areas. Or we're right, we will still be talking about this in a year to come. We cannot afford to do this because sustainability of primary care is crucial, and not just general practice. It's all these other roles as well, which we are still struggling to recruit to. We don't have all these advanced nurse practitioners and pharmacists that people think are sitting there waiting to be employed. So it's significantly challenging. Please don't underestimate this.
Catherine, is it an extension of this discussion?
No, it's not an extension of the discussion, Chair. It was just really to close off to say that's very helpful. I think the oversight that you're suggesting in terms of how that board's membership will be structured will be useful. I think you're quite right to highlight that it's also not just about adults, and people make the mistake of thinking that health and social care partnerships are responsible only for adult services, and this is a very clear example of where that is not the case, and the criticality of primary care to all members, you know, of the Angus community, and obviously beyond Angus and Tayside more widely. So it is really critical. I don't think this is, and I think it's a really, really helpful report to have seen, and I'm just very keen to understand how we best are updated and cited on the progress and any challenges that emerge, because I think that this has really cross-cutting ramifications. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. It's also linked very closely to the new Prevention and Early Intervention Board that has just started up. So, and that is key as well. Okay, before I move on to the last item, thanks for that discussion. I'd just like to remind the committee that this is Peter Burke's last formal audit meeting. I believe may come along to the development session, but this is your final audit meeting, I believe, Peter. And I would just like personally to sort of express my thanks for your dedication to this group and to your frequent questions, which are always to the point and very succinct and very, very diplomatically and graciously delivered. So I wish you well in the future. Your contributions will be greatly missed, and as I'm sure that people will be telling you that at various forums that you belong to. I personally would like to thank you for the help and support you've given me when I first started. So I'd like that noted as well. But I don't know if Gail or Sandy want to say anything just to support that. No.
Yeah,
No.
I think Sandy and I both been waiting on each other. I was waiting on Sandy because he's the lead for Audit Committee, but I will see Peter myself tomorrow, so hopefully we'll get a real hug rather than a virtual hug. But I would absolutely echo everything you've said, Andrew, and multiply that tenfold. Peter has been with me all the way through these last 7 years, and I really can't emphasize enough how supportive, helpful, challenging, all these words he's been to me around carers and the carers rep. And I wouldn't have the knowledge that I do have around that without Peter's support.
Thanks for that, Gail.
Yeah, Chair, can I just
yes, Sandy?
as well? Yeah, sorry, I thought Gail was going first, was she leaning over to switch her mic on there? That's what I thought was happening. Peter, yeah, on a personal basis, yeah, I, like others, very grateful for your input to the Audit Committee and the questions and the thoroughness which you've dealt with this, as do all the Audit Committee members. It's, you know, on one hand, I kind of come into most meetings thinking, I hope I don't get asked any questions, but, you know, when you're doing the job, you really do want to get asked the questions because it's the only way that you really know that you're putting in front of people and people are making something of it. So it is always great to get those questions, and thank you for your input. And I know that for everybody who's taking part in the Audit Committee, it's another thing on top of being part of an IJB, and we always have these meetings on the same day. So for you and for everybody else, I do appreciate it's quite a commitment on these days. So thank you very much for your input over the years. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, everybody. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I wish you all well. I guess I'll see most of you this afternoon anyway, but yeah, as an audit committee, I think you do a great job. I think it, as I said to Sandy the other day, I was expecting it to look back at what's happened, but instead we're looking forward and planning ahead. And I think that's a really great way of doing business. So yeah, long may you continue.
Thanks very much, Peter, for that. Okay, just one final item, which is item 16, which is the date of the next meeting. That's to be held on Wednesday, 26th of April 2023 at 11:30.
Chair, can I just go back? Did we agree the recommendations of item 15? I completely missed that.
Probably did miss it actually. Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, caught up in the discussion at the end. But yes, let's just do that. The primary care sustainability report, item 15. The recommendations were that we should acknowledge the issue of the draft Sustainability Primary Care Internal Audit Report, and notes that a copy of the finalised report will be shared with the Audit Committee members between meetings and discussed formally at the April, I think that's 2023 it should be, not 2022 Audit Committee. It looks like a mistake typo there. So do we agree with that? Yeah, everybody's thumbs up all round. Okay, thanks for everybody's patience. It's been a very long meeting, and thanks for participating. You've got 55 minutes before the next big meeting. So thanks everybody for and have a very happy Christmas and New Year when it comes. So won't see you before then.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.